Justin. So I want to thank you for responding to my video where I asked you a question. However, I do want to point out that you really didn't actually answer my question. I asked you whether or not HR has the right to override a person's feeling offended by something a coworker said, and you mainly discussed zero-tolerance policies in the workplace. Now, I'm not arguing with you about zero-tolerance policies. Zero-tolerance policies can cause people to get fired for stupid reasons, but it really wasn't the point of my video at all to discuss zero-tolerance policies. Whether you agree with zero-tolerance policies or not, we have to accept the fact that they exist, and in the case we're discussing, it was in effect. So I figured I could kind of kill two birds with one stone here in response to you. I have a two-part question for you. The first part talks about my original video. So going back to my original video. Now, forget about discussing whether a zero-tolerance policy is valid or not. For the sake of this question, it exists and it is in effect. My question was, does HR have the right to override a person being offended and not punish the person who offended them? I'm again going to use the example of hate speech. Let's say I'm in an office setting and I talk about my weekend and mention my tough questions for Jehovah's Witness series. A Jehovah's Witness then comes up to me and tells me that they feel what I do with my time is bad stuff and that I'm just looking to further an evil apostate agenda. Now, you and I both know the history behind the word apostate, especially in a Jehovah's Witness setting. We also know the negative connotations it brings, what an apostate is correlated with. We both know in the sense of the term hate speech, it absolutely qualifies. The term apostate is correlated with, monkey raping bastards that are in direct opposition to God, right? So if I went to HR saying that I was offended by their use of this word towards me, that I feel it triggers the zero-tolerance policy of hate speech because of the connotations of this word, do you feel that HR has the right to tell me, since they don't feel apostate is hate speech, that they're not going to discipline this person? Or do you feel that they can tell me, even though it does qualify as hate speech, they're going to go back on their zero-tolerance policy because it's the person's religious view? Remember, this isn't a discussion on whether zero-tolerance policies should be in effect or if they shouldn't. This is strictly regarding the reaction of HR for the zero-tolerance policy. So, same tune, different words. If a Jehovah's Witness was in the workplace and talked about how they spent the weekend pioneering, then you went up to them and said, I don't agree with your religion, I feel that's bad stuff, and I feel you're in a deceptive mind control cult. Now again, people know the negative connotation of the word cult. It implies all sorts of crazy things, killing people using Kool-Aid, abducting people, you know the connotations of cult. Now if this Jehovah's Witness went to HR saying that they felt your use of the word cult triggers the definition of hate speech in their zero-tolerance policy, do you think that HR has the right to override them and say, I don't feel calling your religion a cult classifies as hate speech, even though you think it is? Or do you think they could say something like, even though cult does technically fit the definition of hate speech in our zero-tolerance policy, we're not going to enforce it in this case because it's their religious belief that your religion is a cult? So that's the question here. Do you feel that HR can and should override people's being offended by implied hate speech, words effectively telling them that they should not be offended by these things? Do you feel that HR, even if deeming something to fit their zero-tolerance policy, can just ignore it because they don't want to fire someone even upon violation of the zero-tolerance policy? Once more, I'm going to ask to avoid discussing whether or not zero-tolerance policies should or should not be in effect. Now, for the second part of the question to you, let's say we're in an office that does not have a zero-tolerance policy in effect at all. What phrase do you feel that someone should get fired for saying in the workplace? Now, I want to preface these examples by just asking you not to say nothing. It's like if I asked a Jehovah's Witness, what evidence could I show you that would convince you Jehovah's Witnesses are not the right religion? If someone answers me, nothing, I don't consider them reasonable people. They're sticking with their principles even if they know they're wrong. In this case, I say the same. Don't just say nothing. Because I would then really just consider you an unreasonable person who's sticking to their principle for the sake of sticking to their principle, and not necessarily because you think you're right. What if I went up to an African American and said, I feel that the black race is lazier than the white race? You know, if it were my belief and I was simply espousing my beliefs, do you think if the person I said that to went to HR because they were offended at what I said, I should be fired? If the person I told them went off and told everyone in the workplace, which caused them not to like me and not to want to work with me anymore, would you say that I offended enough people to warrant being fired by just saying that one thing? What if I went up to a female supervisor and told her that I wasn't comfortable taking orders from her because she was a female? I thought it was bad stuff to have women as supervisors because man is head over the woman. So says the Bible. Would you think I deserve to be fired for that? What I'm trying to get at here is what phrase, what subject would you feel absolutely justified in firing a person over uttering in the workplace? There's got to be something that someone can say. I don't mean reprimanded, because that's essentially telling you that you can't say something in the workplace. It's taking away your freedom by reprimanding you. I don't mean being put on some sort of performance-enhancing program. It's the same thing. If they say this thing once, they're told never to say it again, and they're taking away their free speech. What I'm asking here is, what can someone say once, just once, that's so offensive you feel they should be fired over it? Alright, so thanks, Dustin. I'm hoping to see your response soon. Tim Kilgore signing off.